cards coming soon. And on the Standard, you are on your own. Pole sana.
Oh yes. It is the 7th day of the 11th month of 2023. I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyerungiti. It is raining cats and dogs out here if you've just woken up. Prepare yourself for some gumboots or stepping on some water out here, mostly if you live around Nairobi. But we'll be here to just give you those particular updates on where to actually the whole traffic and all that. But the fact that it is actually raining and all these particular matters, are your children really safe out here when it comes to even the fact that they have closed school until January something there? I mean, you have
8th of January.
8th of January, yes. So until then, are your children really safe? We'll be discussing all that later on at around 8 a.m. So don't miss out for that. But first, let's begin our highlights this morning. And the first one being mixed reactions to the government's declaration of a public holiday on Monday, November 13th, for national tree planting exercise to take advantage of the rainy season.
Embattled Meru Governor Kawera Mwangaza's two-day impeachment trial begins today before the Senate, less than a year after surviving a similar attempt to remove her from office.
Meanwhile, manhunt continues for two suspects still at large after close to 95 million shillings disappeared from a cash-on-transit vehicle that was ferrying the money to a bank.
Let's take a look at the big story this morning. Now, the government has declared Monday, November 13th, a public holiday for the public to take part in a national tree growing exercise. In a Gazette notice dated November 6th, Interior CS Kithure Kindiki said President William Ruto will lead the country in the tree growing exercise. This exercise will also be marked across the 47 counties, presided over by cabinet secretaries and governors, where all Kenyans and the general public shall be expected to take part. The move to declare November 13th a public holiday follows the decision of the cabinet sitting in Mombasa on Friday on the need to save the country from the devastating effects of climate change. Meanwhile, national examinations scheduled for that day shall proceed normally. And so this morning we ask, do you think a public holiday will boost government efforts to plant trees? Do you think it will work that a public holiday will boost government efforts to plant trees? You can share your sentiments on our social media pages on X, TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Let's take a look at the day's diary.
And on to today's diary, the KCSE exams continue. Over 900,000 candidates will today continue their theory exams as they sit for the big paper this morning, the mathematics paper. Fred and I yesterday were asking you, do you really remember telling Mwalimu wa Maths hapa ni wapi? This particular morning you'll be facing Mwalimu wa Maths. But away from that, the World Quality Day, CS's Ministry of Trade, Rebecca Miano, National Standards Council Chairman Peter Munyeri, and Managing Director Esther Ngari are expected to be the guests on the precursor ceremony to mark this year's World Quality Day, which will be at the end of this particular week. And well away from that, another bit that is also on our highlight this morning as we flip this diary with you. Meru Governor Kawera Mwangaza is set to appear before Senate plenary to answer allegations raised by Meru's MCAs on her conduct in the county as she looks to defend herself from impeachment a second time. The senators will hold a two-day plenary for the hearings starting today at around 9 a.m. and the afternoon session starting at around 2:30 p.m. until closure of business. Moving on, the Principal Secretary for the State Department for EAC, Abdi Dupat, is expected to address on the anticipated joint ministerial tour at the Busia one-stop border post on the 9th of November by the CS for EAC, Penina Malonza, and her Ugandan counterpart, the retired Honorable First Deputy Prime Minister Rebecca Alitwala Kadaga. That is just a brief on today's diary. Let's take a look at today in history. And we do start back in 1972. So in 1972, ladies and gentlemen, Richard Nixon defeated Senator George McGovern and was re-elected president of the United States. In 1987, and in a bloodless coup in Tunisia, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali took over the presidentship of Tunisia from President Habib Bourguiba. That is on Today in History. Remember, this particular diary will be updated as we move on from around 9 a.m. into our county diary. And as Standard says, you're on your own. We are telling you you're not on your own. We are with you this morning.
Well, but at least the Standard says you are on your own. That's a big headline on the Standard this morning. Cabinet secretaries tell Dialogue team that things are beyond their control. And instead of putting in place measures to bring down the cost of living, Kenyans should brace for tougher times. That story is on page 4 and 5 of the Standard. 300 shillings projection. This is a projection by Energy CS, Davis Chirchir. He says the cost of fuel could rise to an all-time high if the conflict between Israel and Hamas does not dissipate. But the central bank says the war has not affected prices yet. Now, the two CSs, one for Treasury in Njuguna Ndungu, says the Hustler Fund government to government deal, affordable housing is an intervention. The whole issue is you start it off and once it is working, you release it to the market. The Energy CS says, I read an article that international prices could go to $150 per barrel because of the Israel-Hamas war, which would literally mean our products going to a high of 300 shillings per litre. You are on your own. Other stories given prominence on the front page. Investigations always ongoing for journalists killed or hurt by police. These are special report on pages 10 and 11 of the Standard. Elsewhere, thousands displaced as heavy rains continue to wreak havoc. Kenyans across the country continue to feel the heat from the heavy downpour, with 10,000 displaced in Tana River and thousands more losing property and livelihoods. That story is covered on page 8. Another highlight, imports body warns of dire food shortage. Wow. And you know, you look at all the three big headlines and there's nothing to smile about. You're on your own. There's floods wreaking havoc and imports body warning of dire food shortages. On the top strip of the Standard, how Kenya oil deal ruined trade with Uganda. Stories on page 2 and 3. It's a big story, widespread. Elsewhere, KRA predicts decline in corporate tax. That's in business. Wow.
It's interesting, actually, all of the stories on the front page, all of them.
All of the headlines on the front page of the Standard are negative.
A negative, yes. I mean, even in the pull-out on Financial Standard, talk about why mining reforms could fail to spark.
Wow. And in sports, hockey team left chasing shadows. Even that one, there's nothing to smile about.
Oh, yes.
Okay, let's flip over. Newcastle is a team on a mission. Even that, I'm not even willing to look at. Let's take a look at the Daily Nation.
On the Daily Nation, I mean, Chelsea right now is smiling after, beating, I think, Tottenham Hotspurs. About, yes. Was it 5 goals or how much?
It was 1 goal to 4.
4, yes, wow. Chelsea fans are now smiling out here. But on the front page of Daily Nation, 300 Kenyan shillings a litre for petrol on the cards. Matters tough here. Amid the expectation that fuel prices will drop next week, the government releases its monthly review given the recent decline in global crude prices. Energy Minister Davis Chirchir yesterday warned the prices will rise to historic highs due to the Israel-Hamas war. This will make life even more difficult for many Kenyans struggling under the current high cost of living. That is on page 4. On the bottom strip there, a photo of a student at St. Clair Girls Secondary School in Elbagon, Nakuru County, writing the chemistry paper 1 yesterday during the first day of the KCSE national exams. That is given prominence on page 6 and 7. On the right strip there, more sad news right in Kenya happened yesterday, Monday morning at around 3 a.m. Dawn crash claims 11 people died at dawn yesterday when a matatu and a lorry collided head-on on the busy Nakuru-Eldoret highway. 8 people died on the spot, while 3 others succumbed to their injuries as they were being rushed to hospital. Witness accounts and a road traffic report indicate the driver of the lorry lost control and veered off his lane before colliding with the matatu. Quite sad there, and we'll be bringing you more of these conversations on how to be safe on the road, even as we head into the festive seasons. Away from that, security firm staff make away with retailers 94 million Kenyan shillings. So 2 employees of security firms, Wells Fargo, on the run after allegedly stealing 94 million Kenyan shillings in cash belonging to retail giant Quickmart. Talk about some Kenyan-made money heist. Moving on, police search for money for man over ex-wife's murder. It is on page 8. Matters music. People's rendition of top Rumba song goes viral. What started as a performance to entertain guests at a farewell party has turned a group of pupils from Migosi Primary School into celebrities overnight. And on the pull-out page, powering SMEs from Kibera to the world. Well, at least on the front page of Daily Nation, there are a couple of things to be smiling about.
Okay.
But on the back page, ignore El Nino warning at your peril, weatherman. And they have a photo of the Kenya Meteorological Department Director, is Dr. David Gikunju, explaining there, just behind that apparel there. And this, even as President Ruto last month played down the forecast, saying rains won't be as bad as predicted. But, well, we thank God for the rains.
Well, mipango ya serikali ya kunywa maji. Tuangazie kurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Habari kuu pale, mipango ya serikali ya kunywa maji. Serikali yaanza kupoteza mabilioni, huku kampuni zikifuta maelfu mbali na kubuni mbinu za kuepuka ushuru. Janja na janjarue wa Kenya na wamiliki wa biashara wabuni mbinu mbalimbali za kuhepa makali ya ushuru na kodi mpya za serikali ili kudumisha faida na ajira. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili, na Taifa Leo hapa inafanya kazi
muro au
kazi ya kanisa. Bei ya mafuta KRA yapoteza bilioni 12. Wafanyabiashara waondoa huduma ya till number ili kuepuka ushuru. Zaidi ya wawekezaji 6,000 wajiondoa katika soko la hisa la NSE. Waajiri waamua kuajiri vibarua badala ya wafanyakazi wa kudumu ili kuhepa ada ya nyumba, NSSF, NHIF na ushuru wa mapato. Baadhi ya mbinu ambazo Wakenya na wamiliki wa biashara wamebuni kukwepa makali ya ushuru. Kwingineko, mafuriko yasababisha janga. Magavana wa eneo la kaskazini mashariki walilia usaidizi kutoka kwa serikali kuu. Kwingineko, Amerika yaisukuma Israel vikali, huku waliokufa wakifika 10,000. Israel yatakiwa isitishe mapigano. Kwenye spoti, UEFA, Man City waalika wanyonge. Milan PSG wakirudiana, miamba wa EPL watarajiwa kuliza Young Boys. Kurasa wa 20. Pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, vidokezo zaidi. Wasiwasi wa ukeketaji Samburu. Wasichana wa shule waogopa kukeketwa na kuozwa katika likizo ndefu. Na kwingineko katika masuala ya elimu, haswa mtihani wa KCSE, walimu wa shule za msingi pakavu. Mtihani wa kitaifa wa kidato cha 4 kusimamiwa na walimu wa sekondari pekee. Hizo ndizo habari kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, mipango ya serikali ya kunywa maji.
On the front page of the Star this morning, Kenya paying for Uhuru blunders. That is according to Ruto's men. Treasury CS Professor Njuguna Ndung'u warns against tampering with current tax measures. Give that on page 4 and 5. On the bottom there, they have a photo of floods and staff from the Kenya Red Cross, just helping some of the livestock there being washed away. And even as some of this livestock are trying to walk in that flooded area, that is in Githu village out there. And from that, on the right strip of the Star Njiru residents want eviction orders halted. So residents of Njiru Estate in Nairobi have moved to court seeking stay orders against a judgment that directed they be evicted from 1,000 acres of land belonging to deceased politician Gershon Kirima. The over 500 residents had asked that the case be certified urgent, owing to the threat of eviction of being given only 50 days to vacate. And on page 2, inside job, they ask security firm staff disappear with 94 million Kenyan shillings. And in Matters Voices there, page 16, African unity, Kenyans must take lead. Up there on the top strip, Matters Politics, asking if it is talks stalemate. Azimio won't sign bipartisan deal if cost of living is not addressed. That is according to ODM leader Raila Odinga on page 6. That is the front page of the Star.
Let's take a look at the Business Daily. On the Business Daily, KRA's hand in Uganda, Kenya transit fuel middlemen fight. Museveni turns heat on management fees by oil marketers, and KRA charges $10 per 1,000 litres of transit fuel. And that's a big headline there. Other stories, India's Mehta takes on Rai with agrochemical Mohoroni bid. That's the other big headline on the front page of the Business Daily. And on the ticker there, more highlights. Kenya takes a 40 billion shilling currency hit on SGR debt. Elsewhere, Kwale titanium miner exit risks 870 jobs. And CBK goes after Hawala in fight against money transfer rogues. The Central Bank of Kenya has warned the public against rogue money transfer agents offering alternative remittance channels without a license from the Apex Bank. And those are the stories featured on the front page of the Business Daily.
Back to some sad news on the front page of People Daily. Stark reminder of the country we're living in. Petrol prices set to hit 300 Kenyan shillings per litre. And they're calling it, People Daily is calling it some dark clouds here. Says Chirchir claims raging Israel-Palestine war could lead to increase in cost of fuel by next week. But CBK differs, saying international cost of fuel has declined due to waning impact of Middle East conflict. That is on page 4 there. On the right side, state allays fears of cheating in a KCSE exam. And just below that, KRA rips big from airtime tax. So excess duty collection outperformed all other revenue heads in the first quarter of the current financial year. And on the top strip, quite a gruesome accident that happened yesterday morning at around 3 a.m. 11 die in Nakuru road accident. And once more, may their souls rest in eternal peace.
Yes, let's cross the border now to Uganda and we take a look at the Daily Monitor in Uganda. The big story there, teenagers not taking HIV drugs, report says. A number of areas, including Kampala and Bugisu, have been singled out for the low uptake of the antiretroviral drugs among people below 19 years, with health authorities partly blaming it on stigma. The story is on page 3, and we've always said Matters HIV...
making it the front page of Daily Monitor,
yes,
Uganda papers.
Quite a frequent appearance on the front page of the Daily Monitor. It's big news in Uganda. Other big stories in Uganda this morning, Kagezi murder suspects remanded to Luzira. And these ones, I think they're the ones who killed the tourists at a national park in Uganda. Other highlights, why many saunas are a ticking time bomb. Elsewhere, no conjugal rights on eve of Busoga royal wedding. These are the big stories in Uganda this morning.
All right, Vuke Pale, Tanzania. And we do start with the Citizen revealed focus areas in government's 2024-2025 plan. And as I was mentioning, yesterday, the Tanzanian papers are always optimistic of the future, and it is quite rare to see some negative news reflected here. So they say the government revealed yesterday that it will take a raft of measures in the next financial year as part of efforts to create an inclusive economy. Other stories on The Citizen: Africa needs fair trade with the rest of the world. This is according to UK envoy. They have the photo there of UK's High Commissioner to Tanzania is David Conker. On page 4, it is an exclusive interview done there. Other stories: Dar Maputo set for natural gas share agreement. And, well, yeah, that is basically the front page of The Citizen.
Okay, tuangazie gazeti la Mwananchi. Kwenye jarida la Mwananchi kule Tanzania ni bajeti ya kilimo uchaguzi, mpango wa taifa na mwongozo wa bajeti wajikita kuongeza thamani ya kilimo, kuboresha maisha ya vijijini na uchaguzi. Kitila ahidi ajira mpya 1160 kuzalishwa, deni ya serikali lafikia trilioni 82, Mwigulu afafanua. Well, 82 trillion Tanzania money. It's a very busy page. So the other big headline on the front page of Mwananchi: wananchi vigogo waliohusika na ufisadi, ripoti ya CAG watajwe. Kwingineko, ufaulu watema wanafunzi 200 mfuko wa Samia. Habari zaidi: siri Uingereza kuja kuwekeza zaidi Tanzania. Vidokezo vingine: mambo manne kukuza uchumi wa gesi asilia, na siku 462 za mateso ya Profesa J kitandani. Habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye jarida la Mwananchi kule Tanzania.
Tukirejea hapa Kenya, on page 17 of Daily Nation, even as you get on maswala ya caricature, quite an interesting and satirical piece there. Reflects what is on the front page of most of the dailies this morning. Hypothetical petrol station and gas station there is a common Mwananchi carrying his car, sweating profusely, even as a gentleman there with glasses and a yellow pullover. He's probably thinking, or maybe talking, but you can't really tell what he's saying, so probably that is some gibberish that he's saying. And there's another gentleman there looking and inspecting that vehicle. And that particular machine there says 300 Kenyan shillings. So maybe that will be the common Mwananchi as of next week on Tuesday, the 14th.
Okay. The cartoon on the Standard mirrors what's happening in the Middle East. A lot of chaos and destruction and death, with military jets overflying Gaza. And it's a continuing story on the conflict in the Middle East. That's a cartoon on the Standard today.
On page 10 of People Daily, Stan is wishing the candidates success, even as the commentator there says, no cheating, Big Brother is watching. The whole magnifying glass on both the students there who are writing their papers this morning goes to talk largely on even the whole new rules and regulations that have been set to curb exam cheating. Today will be the second day officially, so we'll really have to see how much.
If you ask me, I think it's the main day, the mathematics paper one.
Tomorrow is just a teaser.
Once you're done with the mathematics paper, everything else can come.
Right.
We continue wishing all the candidates all the best in their exams.
Oh, yes.
Remember the question today, now that you have a holiday next Monday to plant trees, do you think a public holiday will boost government efforts to plant trees? That's our question, and you can share your feedback on our social media pages on X, TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. After the break, State of the Nation. Evans Wafula, human rights consultant, Angel Mbuthia, chairperson, Jubilee Youth League, and Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst. Those are our panelists this morning as we look at what's happening to our country, the big headlines and big highlights right here on TV47. You're watching Morning Cafe. Like you're watching Morning Cafe on TV47, you know I want to take a look at the state of the nation this Tuesday morning. We're privileged to have Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst. Arnold, it's good to have you in studio. Karibu sana. Also with us in studio, Evans Wafula, human rights consultant and political analyst. Karibu. And Angel Mbudia, chairperson, Jubilee Youth League, joins us as well. It's a pleasure to have you in studio.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the front page of the Standard today, we were struggling to find a positive headline this morning. You are on your own, that's a big headline, talking about that prediction of that fuel prices might go as high as 300 shillings a litre. Imports body warns of dire food shortage. Thousands displaced as heavy rains continue to wreak havoc. Kere predicts decline in corporate tax. How Kenya oil deal ruined trade with Uganda, and even hockey. Our team is chasing shadows. And that's how we start our State of the Nation this morning. Of course, that prediction by the CS for Energy, Davis Chirchir, that oil prices could go as high as 300 shillings a litre, also features on the front page of the Daily Nation. That's a big headline, and on the People Daily as well. And on the Daily Nation, there's a highlight just on top of the big headline. They say neighboring Tanzania has reduced fuel prices for November. Arnold, the president is expected to give a State of the Nation address this Thursday. Negative sentiments everywhere.
Well, literally, at the beginning of the week, you are a seasoned newsman, and you know that normally Tuesdays, Mondays are very thin news days. So ordinarily, you are going to have guys in the newsroom scrounging around for positive stuff. But over and above, I would say that entirely, we do not have bad news all around. That's the truth, that we are here, we don't look like we are sad people. I look at everybody with this particular set. And as much as there could be pain in our pockets here and there, the headlines entirely do not, in my opinion, really present the image that we have as a country. There are more positive things that I will talk about. Like, for example, we have successfully onboarded the CBC, done away with the primary section for the first time. It wasn't easy. It was quite a difficult take. We still have got teething problems, but then that was a bridge we've actually crossed. We've come from a place where we had a standstill, but as a nation, we are doing quite well.
A standstill in what?
Post-election standstill. We had demonstrations every other day. The problem is that we forget very fast. But those are some of the contributions as to where we are today. So as per the prices of oil, I think if you remember some times back, and people who follow this trade will tell you that the stock we are using today is 100 days from when it actually was procured. Then where we're going in the next 100 days, you can actually tell when it lands and how the cost will look like. It's something you can project. It doesn't happen in a spin. So I still feel the state of the nation is strong, looking at where we've come from. I've always insisted that if you're going to look at people in governance, and I will use the police, for example. If you use where the police have actually missed as the only indicator on how the police are actually performing, then you probably are wrong. For example, if we had one terrorist attack or two, and then you actually use that to actually then declare that the police are not effective, you probably are missing out on the many they've actually stopped. Have we, for example, looked at the measures government has put in place that has actually forestalled a much worse situation? If we were to ask that, then you will actually realize that, we didn't get here in a fluke. That's the truth. That it's been a journey coming around here. If you look at headlines back in time, they will tell us how we were running our debt book, how we were actually doing governance 3, 4, 5 years ago. So people said we will get here.
Now you're talking about the reality of now, and you're talking about how we got here. But you're saying that everything is positive.
That's what I'm saying, that it could be worse. We actually have had projections that we will default on our debt. If you actually look at the headlines 3, 4, 5 years ago, people say that at this particular point, we will actually have defaulted. We've actually worked around that. So, of course, for the news, you know that the old adage remains that If a man bites a dog, that's news. But if a dog bites a man, it's not news. So this is a man biting a dog.
And listening to Arnold, Arnold is very positive and very optimistic. But surely, can journalists miss positive news for the entire front page?
Will it sell?
And you see, when journalists or media houses struggle for news, as Arnold says, scrounging for headlines, then it usually appears in the way that every daily has a different headline, because there's nothing big. But when you talk about 300 shillings a litre for a litre of fuel, that is a common headline in at least 3 dailies. They're not struggling for a headline.
I think it's unfortunate, my colleague here, Maliba. I think I'm looking at the state of the nation in 3 contexts. Of course, it's the social fabric of the nation, it's the political governance and leadership, and also the economic stability. You can extend and talk about also the territorial integrity of our nation. But looking at those aspects that I've just mentioned, I think we should be discussing about state failure. I think I think we are heading towards either state failure or total state collapse. What is happening now, you can see with the fuel prices, I think these are just excuses that we are hearing from the government. I think they asked for a job, they got the job, and they need to deliver. You know, it's like when last time they were saying it's about Ukraine and Russia. Now I'm hearing it's about what is happening in Israel between Hamas and the Israelis. Maybe next time they'll blame even Tanzania. Mm-hmm. So I think for us to look at these things and talk about what is happening in terms of even the media doesn't cook headlines. I think the media also reacts to the mood of the people or the nation, the direction the nation is going. You see, when you see headlines like this that are consistent in all the 3 newspapers, they're actually addressing a very critical thing. I think the social fabric of this nation is so shaken, is threatened by the economic instability. It's shaken by almost total collapse of the political leadership. Because I think what the government has done, and it's very unfortunate, it seems that whenever they're in a problem, they have unleashed a very perfect academic propaganda machine. And you'll see a lot of people coming out in form of experts, in form of economists, trying to defend the government. But then there's totally nothing to defend. I think from the time they entered in government, they started blaming the previous regime. Mm-hmm. They blamed Uhuru. So do you blame Uhuru again today for the price of the fuel?
Okay. Now, the president on Thursday will be making his very first State of the Nation address. And just like Maliba, he will be looking for the positives to actually tell Kenyans. Can you find a few things that you think the president can hang on to when he makes that address?
All right, I think that maybe the only positive thing I've read the past few days is that there's lower chest thumping from this government, and that's the only positive thing I read, because they've also realized that we cannot do much by stamping our chests and thinking that we can run this government on our own. This I say because of what happened at the National Dialogues Committee yesterday, where we saw cabinet secretaries making presentations and justifying the state of the nation and how they are running things and how things are looking the way they are looking. So when I look at the state of the nation, I think the chest thumping now has gone down, because we were told the national dialogues will go nowhere. Nothing will come out of it. But now, seemingly, it looks like that thread of hope that the country is looking up to see to it that it's a platform for the government to show that we are actually doing something about this. Ideally, they are not, but because we would be seeing that in the results that of our day-to-day. I even saw the Prime Cabinet Secretary talking about embassies being on the red. And a week ago, we were being told how justifiable the presidential trips were. Mm-hmm. And the presentations were being made to the Prime Cabinet Secretary, and technical experts were telling the Prime Minister that that with every 1 shilling that is invested in embassies, they give back 572 Kenya shillings. I mean, who doesn't want a chicken at home that you only invest in 1 shilling but then gives you 572 shillings in return? But then now they're on the red, meaning that all these travels that the president has been making, where, I mean, what were they for? I mean, why do we allocate so much money to embassies, I mean, to high commissions, and we are not getting the returns that we ought to get? I think we are having a lot of misdirected priorities by this government. There's more that can be done to it. We are seeing so many negatives, but at the end of the day, we are all in this bus, and if it crashes, we all crash.
Okay. Maliba, the expectation is that the president will try to his level best to give the positives that have been there. Just now you were talking about the positives that could have been featured on the front pages, but we are not seeing any. The president as well will be hard pressed to say the achievements of this government 1 year on. Actually 1 year plus. And people are struggling to see what this administration has achieved so far.
You know, first of all, before I respond to that, I'd like us to read the statement by the CS that is actually informing all these headlines. Again, context is king. Because you, again, in your vocation, you understand that in this thing called context, there's the pretext, the text, or rather the stuff before the text itself, and then post-text. Now, if you were to read this statement, I read an article that international prices could go to $150 per barrel because of the Israeli-Hamas war, which would literally mean our products going to as high of 300 shillings per litre. This statement is highly spinned. I know that the CS should ordinarily have thought much better than throwing this line around. Otherwise, if we were to look at context as is, that he's talking about something he read, and then working with existing matrix on how we actually arrive at prices, he puts it at this. But then you read all the headlines and everything going around. So everybody's talking about prices going up to 300.
Are we wrong? Are we wrong?
That's what I'm saying. But look at this. I read, this is the CS saying, I read an article that international prices could go up to. And again, you know, the Hamas-Israeli war or the Ukraine-Russian war, all of us know that the Middle East, every time there is a little bit of a flu in the Middle East, the rest of us catch a cold. You would remember 1972, you would remember the Yom Kippur war. Every time the Middle East has had a little bit of a tiff, the prices, oil prices have actually been very sensitive to whatever happens in that particular region. So this is actually an opinion. And when we are discussing this and actually even phrasing news, at least we know that opinion is free. Like what we are doing here, opinion is free. Facts are sacred. So did he really say that the prices will go? No, he's using the word could. But do we really have to split hairs to get to this? That's why I actually was saying sometimes we are scrounging for actually news, because that is exactly not what he said. He said, he didn't say it will go, he said it could go.
It was but not a roadside statement. He was before the national dialogue.
And you put that statement.
It's a formal presentation he was making.
And he was giving his opinion, and he says what he has read, and using the matrix that exists. Anybody, if you are told that probably oil will go up to $50 per barrel, you work out, you know the landing bills, you know the taxes, you know everything. You can work out and get to this. Be that as it may, you're talking about positives. Like I've actually tried to point out that there's so much we can actually look up to a nation. But Kenya, you know, we are a nation that loves to lament. When you look at us in morning breakfast shows, when we speak sometimes, you would think that the country is burning. And that is one of the reasons why it's actually very, why we are losing competitiveness. Because Kenyans want to actually, in the name of democracy, and it's given, our Bill of Rights is actually sovereign, to do everything. But our neighbors, for example, should not react to how we are behaving. Him and I comes from the Western region. So if we choose to make that route very difficult for them to actually bring in their goods, how do we expect Uganda to sit there and then blame the government for having done whatever they've done? Everybody else, we've been a leading, and by the way, Kenya has not always been the leading country in East Africa. Also, let's also not lie to ourselves. There are days when our people left this country to go and work in Uganda for the longest time. There were days when Uganda was the better economy. There were days, not so long ago, when Tanzania was actually the best economy around here. Ethiopia is on the other side. So we are in a region where everybody is coming up. This hegemony that we actually are looking forward to, and always making false comparisons, Like they've done this. If you're talking about Tanzania having brought down the prices, by how much? And last time, they actually raised their fuel at a bigger percentage than ours. It's actually out there. That's what I'm saying. Facts are sacred. So when you raise your fuel a month ago or 2 months ago by up to 30%, then you are reducing by 5% now. And we actually want to call that positive. People doing business will know that
it
it's
is
not.
positive. Any reduction in fuel prices will be positive, right?
You already have actually robbed me of up to 25%.
If there was robbery, 217 shillings is way beyond what we expected to be at this time.
I hope Maliba is not putting a case for the CS.
So I'm not.
What else should we be listening to if not the CS for energy?
No, I think his position is a ministerial position. And we really need to be very honest and know that he doesn't work in isolation. I think in his ministry, there are very many technocrats. Mm-hmm. There's information that this price is not determined by what is happening in Israel and Hamas. This price, they had already projected it. And they're just bringing it to us. And they warned us. They told us that we are going to increase the price of fuel almost every month.
Yes.
Whether there's a conflict in Middle East or no, Kenyans knew that the price of fuel will keep on increasing. And this is one of the things actually people have been talking about. You see, prices of fuel affect food prices also. And then also we see we're almost having a food crisis in the country. The cost of living is high. This is not because of what is happening in Hamas. I think the people sitting in the ministry have informed the minister what to present in the dialogue committee. And I think when we sit here and start saying that he read an article, it's not sincere. It's not that he read an article.
But it's what he says.
That we don't have to believe what he's
quotation.
saying. No, let me tell you, we don't have to believe what he's saying. We know he has. This is a ministerial position. This is a ministry that has prepared and advised on how the prices will increase. So to come in a committee and say that I read an article, we cannot take a minister coming to say, I read an article and this is my projection. It is what the ministry has informed him, and we are expecting even these prices probably even go beyond the conflict in Hamas.
For any member of the cabinet to make such a pronouncement, it cannot be taken lightly. Who else can we turn to listen to in as far as these issues are concerned, if at all, as Maliba suggests, we can ignore some of the things that CS says?
Well, from where I sit and with the entire Jubilee leadership and all, I get back and start to think to myself, I think as Kenyans it is time we respected the power of the ballot. Because this government was elected on the basis of hawa majamaa wanaongeza bei ya mafuta usiku na mchana. Uhuru Kenyatta is not doing a good job because because we can't give an excuse of Ukraine and Russia going into war. Now we are seeing the same narrative being peddled and now coming from those who are in government. So it's critical that we accept and acknowledge that we cannot run a government like we are standing on top of cars. We have to fold our sleeves. We have to get down from our campaign mode. We are not in a campaign mode as a nation. It is 1 year down the line. We have to come back and it cannot be a conversation about kingpins and who is not a kingpin. It's time we come to realize that we might not be able to afford the same basic commodities we were affording 3 months ago. It's about time we come to realize that the promises that were made to Kenyans cannot be fulfilled as they were promised. Because when we look at even some of the deliberations that were had yesterday, talking about the Hustler Fund and how effective it has been in the country, and talking about a 20% of it being what works, but Fuliza is still taking the day. And that tells you that regardless of the interest rates, Kenyans are still going for what is more than this Hustler Fund that was promised to young people to be the one that will support small businesses. But the small businesses are the ones that are being attacked today. Small businesses are the ones that are bearing the greatest brink of this government. So it's about time that we brought everyone into the decision-making table. It's about time that even there were some excellent proposals that were made yesterday, asking Kenyans, investors and farmers and innovators to come back and sit down and have a conference and talk about how we are going to move forward as a country. Because the imagination that this government has does not reflect exactly with what the industry is about.
Okay. Arnold, I'm looking at the front page of Taifa Leo and it talks about mipango ya serikali kunywa maji. And it's basically about how Kenyans and business people are looking for ways not to pay the taxation. And kwa bei ya mafuta KRA yapoteza bilioni 12 baada ya Wakenya wengi kuacha kutumia magari yao kutokana na bei ya mafuta. M-Pesa, wafanyabiashara waondoa huduma ya till number ili kukwepa ushuru. Wawekezaji wa kigeni, zaidi ya wawekezaji 6,000 wajiondoa katika soko la hisa NSE. Waajiri waamua kuajiri vibarua badala ya wafanyakazi wa kudumu ili kukwepa ada ya nyumba, NSSF, NHIF na ushuru wa mapato. Now, all these things the president is expected to address. Should there be an admission that, yes, a few things in as far as government policy is concerned are not working the way probably they expected?
The first admission that things are bad was the review of taxes going up. Somebody didn't sit down and decided that they were just going to raise taxes. When the government came in, they sat with government technocrats and people who actually are already in government, and they told them this is the situation. A budget is two ways. It's a projection of what we expect and how we are going to spend it. And this government did not come with its budget from outside. This is a bureaucracy. A government is a continuous one. That is why if anyone ever tells you that you can actually come to government and start everything afresh, they lie to you because you continue from where the others left. So the first admission that things were tight were when we started bootstrapping and tightening the laces of our shoes. That was actually the first indicator that the economy was actually on the red. So that was the first admission. These tight and things that gave people... Do you really think all politicians are actually populists? So don't ever think that there is a politician who sits somewhere and thinks he can hurt people. A politician, including William Ruto, if he had an opportunity to get money from heaven and give us for free so that he's elected, he will do it. So William Ruto cannot show up today and he really wants to hurt the people of Kenya if you really know how he actually has worked over time. So when we came in already, we were not doing well. And this is news, like I'm saying, we've had it. I know people have had it until they're tired. They don't want to hear of it. But then it is this same Azimio that told us that history is important. So if we don't know where we are coming from, we don't know where we are, and we cannot lie about where we are going. So pointing back where we've come from, we've had a 10-year mismanagement of our economy, a very bad one. You need to read international journals, you need to read reviews, you need to read warnings that were told repeatedly that we were not doing things very well. And the problem with the populist politics is that you will go all out. The only change has been that this particular government has stopped borrowing money to support consumption and largely try to actually support production. That's the only difference. That the subsidies, we are removing the subsidies from the consumption end and trying to put them at the production end. That's the only difference. And this is where we are. Otherwise, there is nothing entirely new. Even if you talk about people going out and jet setting and everything else, if you look back, you remember Kenyans were talking about the visiting president. I'm talking about when Uhuru Kenyatta was moving around. So some of these things are repeating themselves. What I'm saying is that the only difference has been taking away the money we are borrowing. We don't have that money, but we borrow and then subsidize consumption. Then we've moved that money to production. Okay. It's going to take a little bit of time before we realize the impact. That's the only difference there has been. Otherwise, everything remains the same. If you look at budget lines, government budget lines, they almost look similar. Sometimes they try to actually just decorate them with new names, but the budget lines are the same. The only difference has been doing away, and even if you brought in those subsidies, it means we go into heavy borrowing to subsidize consumption, and we do not have that money. Yet
the budget line for State House at the presidency has actually gone up.
I think, again, I think what Kenya Kwanza government is implementing is the plan. I don't think it's the continuation of what is my colleague is trying to allude to, continuation of government. I agree with him, that's what's supposed to ordinarily happen, that you come into as a new government and you pick up from the previous government and try to improve. Look, they came in, Asla Fund is totally new. There was a youth fund. We expected that they would come and enrich it and try to make it more accessible and more functional. They decided this does not work. Basically, what they've done is that they've come, the plan, and what they call the plan has completely not failed. It has actually failed. And I think that is where we have a problem. I don't think that they really, when you blame Uhuru for having messed up the country, his economic plan, and everything about what he tries to put together that did not work. You come in and then you decide that we're going to have start on a new slate. You will not be able. People want the government that you cannot develop by taxing. And this is what is happening. I've just heard what you've read. Everything is almost not working. And I think the people around the president, the so-called technocrats, David D also talked about excesses in government. A lot of people conned him in terms of the plan.
And what can work? Well, we are due for a break at 7 a.m. Let's take that break. When we come back, we look at the president's plan, because according to the Taifa Leo headline, mipango yote ya serikali ya kunywa maji. You're watching Morning Cafe. Welcome back. State of the Nation, mipango ya serikali ya kunywa maji. That's a big headline on the front page of Taifa Leo this morning. Now, on Thursday this week, the president will be giving his very first State of the Nation address before Parliament, and he's expected to list the number of achievements, or well, explain to Kenyans what exactly this government is doing in as far as the issues that affect them directly. Now, Angel, it's not an easy thing. Of all the plans that the president came up with, and there are very many promises during the campaigns, sorry to say, but we are struggling to find one that has worked and has worked well. Do you think, from where you sit, there's any that is really working? Maybe the Hustler Fund, or any that you can pick? Because we are struggling, and yes, as Maliba said, we are struggling, even as journalists, to find a positive headline.
Well, I think...
Fertilizer, maybe.
Fertilizer? No, I don't think so, because now where are you going to take that fertilizer? We have El Nino now. I think I think less chest thumping needs to be seen. That, for me, is what I think, even in the political space. And I mean, even as much as we have the freedom to express and what not, we're still seeing a lot of things that this Kenya Kwanza government could have avoided. Because when you talk about the land demolitions that took place in Athi River, you think, I mean, that is not something that could have, I mean, the government could have avoided that entirely. In the previous regime, they said that that would not happen in their regime. And what happens in the first 12 months, that happens. So I think we need to lead this country with a soft hand, with a hand, I mean, cushioned with a velvet glove, because every time we want to chest thump, every time we want to even gag political spaces, I mean, that has really not taken us anywhere. When you're seeing the First Lady yesterday launching projects that were previously launched by the other First Lady, Margaret Kenyatta, then you tend to wonder, I mean, are we taking one step forward, two steps backward? Because now it's like they've now begun their tenure as Kenya Kwanza. And we were told these things would happen. But as much as we were told all that, there's still so much more that could have happened. When we are told that we will scrap out CBC, what is Maliba telling us now? CBC has successfully been onboarded. And there was a whole task force that spent about 200 million Kenyan taxpayers to review the CBC. I mean, I think it's a country of theatrics. I would call this Kenya Kwanza government a pyramid scheme. It came in to power by virtue of lies, by promises that they knew they could not keep, by talking about how much they were in government and yet not in government. I think that's a conversation that needs to end completely.
I have one thing that probably has worked. The political environment is much better than it was at the beginning of the year.
I cannot say that. We've elicited here
if you allow me,
battles because they are political.
The voice is quiet.
If you actually allow me, I can actually tell you about what they've done. Because again, if you look, the problem with looking at today is that you easily can forget what the previous hour was. Number one, I can actually just take you through that we did appoint 6 judges. Remember, initially we'd gone round that, left, right, and center?
On the very first day, yes.
Yeah, gave the judiciary independence. Those are things we don't want to talk about, but there were promises that have been delivered. Of course, we gave the police the independence that we actually had talked about, even appointing an AIE holder for the police away from the ministry. We did away with the DCI group that was actually killing people left, right, and center. We've now forgotten that, yet it was a big issue here. He said that Hustler Fund is new. I actually just want to remind him, and Angel knows that I've actually worked in government, and I'm still a government technician in many ways. In the past, not even with this particular administration, is that the Hustler Fund is not entirely new. We just rebranded the MSME fund, which initially was called the Uhuru Fund, because the guidelines were the same. It's not a new thing. That's why I'm actually, when you talk about the continuity of government, is that the plan is how you're going to, because the requirement, the needs for Kenyans don't change. Today, I will tell you that as a country, I would have read there are about 30 of them, but they are not going to that. There's not so much.
Question on that Hustler Fund. Are you saying that the president should not take credit for the Hustler Fund?
He will, because he brought in, he changed the budget lines. He injected in much more money, changed how it actually functions. But then it's not what you will say that everything here is new. Kenya is the same, the needs are the same. And I need to say this, that you see, at independence, before independence, our ancestors were fighting for one thing, what they called land, others call it independence. After that, we wanted good governance. That is the second liberation. The third liberation is Article 43, socio-economic empowerment. It's not going to change any day. It doesn't matter whoever comes to office. We will still talk about the issues in Article 43. They are the same. So you can't say that the plan is radically different. The only difference with the plan is the approach. It's the method. But the items remain the same, the people remain the same, the country remains the same. We've not changed our national anthem. We've changed the color of the flag.
Okay.
The results are widely different.
And even as Angel was talking about the things that were promised and then they had to revert back, a case in point, last week, the Kenya Meat Commission was reverted back to KDF. It is one of the things that this administration was very vocal about changing, the way the military is being used to run civilian state departments.
Absolutely, and I think it is actually conceding that actually what Uhuru did was better than what they're doing. And I see they are copy pasting, like he's talking about the Hustler Fund. So does it mean that the Hustler Fund, as you allege, is that part of what was there before? They then copy pasted. But one of the things I think they successfully did when it comes to police, the politicization and militarization of the police. You see how the police unleashed terror on Kenyans. And I think this is not something we can sit and say, oh, we have given the police the independence, now the police can be able to do what they do. No, the police is deeply, deeply politicized and militarized. And I think that's one thing that Kenyans need to be worried about. But looking at what is also mentioned, that on Thursday, I think I've seen Itumbi writing something talking about that the state of the nation is about achievements and misses. I think this government has really missed a great deal. And we expect to see on Thursday probably an apology. The truth of the matter, and I think this is important, is that there are people in Kenya Kwanza government who are hell-bent to make sure William Ruto fails. And it is high time he realizes that there are people in his cabinet, people in his technocrat team that are hell-bent to make sure that his government does not succeed. And by giving him wrong information, wrong advice, wrong projections. And that's why they've gotten themselves to the headline that we are reading in Taifa Leo.
The kind of accusations that were leveled against the previous administration, because they've insisted consistently that all this that bedevils the country right now can be blamed directly on the previous administration. You are from the Jubilee Party. Do you feel vindicated now?
Well, not entirely, because there's so much also going on in the political space. But first of all, then, if all those wrong decisions were made in that regime, then why are the same decisions being made now? I mean, really,
which ones are being repeated?
Like the Kenya Meat Commission, relaunching of projects.
I'll give you the
relaunching of projects. I think there's so much going on in the government, in the political space. Now they have not still realized that they're in government. They've not awoken to that shock. And they are copy-pasting because they've really never sat in office to sort of even read and make analysis or do research in terms of the things that they promise and what they can deliver. What they did when they got into office was, first of all, to gag Jubilee Party, bring in wars and fights between members of the Jubilee Party, work with the banks in Kenya to ensure that even Jubilee Party itself, given court rulings from the tribunal courts that gave some orders to allow other rebels of Jubilee Party to even be able to access money from the Jubilee accounts, and even the banks themselves allowing that to happen. Those are things that they wasted that time to plan for El Nino, to plan for CBC, to plan for the economy. That's what they were doing 12 months ago, because when there's garbage in, there's garbage out. Now this is the garbage out that we are seeing. What they have been pumping in since they got into office was nothing directed to make anything mean well for Kenyans. What they all did is to get into government and start paying back the monies they spent on campaigns. That's why we saw all these globe-trotting that have really not yielded to anything. I mean, I think there's a long story that we have for this to give for this country. We cannot paint a school gate of a school and expect the performance of this school to improve.
Okay,
yeah.
Aliba.
First of all, on KMC, I think we'll be splitting hairs, because Uhuru Kenyatta lived in State House. William Ruto should not live in State House because he was opposed to Uhuru Kenyatta. That the military is Kenyan, doesn't change.
But it's only that this administration said expressly that they will stop. At that particular
time, fine. What was the context? Like when we talk about what was running Nairobi then, NMS, there were reasons why people were opposed to it. So today, all of us know, KDF consumes most of what KMC actually does. And when you test, you see, only a fool doesn't change his mind. So we can't actually come around here and say that William has come in, realized that even if we give these other guys this thing, these are the customers. Why should we, for example, have KMC back to the Ministry of Livestock and have somebody else supplying meat to KDF from KMC, when KMC can actually be run by the military? And he cuts that. And the government has been about cutting costs. So anything that will actually happen. I'll give you an example. About 2 weeks ago, it's reported that he actually asked of a product that was supposed to be worked on. He was told it was about 300,000. Then he said, okay, now if we were, that is 1 unit, if we were to do away with the middlemen, how much would it be? He was told it would be about 200. Then he asked of the supplier. When he called the supplier, it was 86,000 shillings. And I asked what was the difference? Why would it take so long? Of course, the excuses about government takes so long. But I need to say this. Even if Kenya Kwanza is struggling, Jubilee cannot hold a candle for this particular administration. As in, anybody who actually has got, who actually misses Jubilee because Kenya Kwanza is not performing, that particular person then has not looked at the pillars that actually inform governance and then that inform the economy. Because we are where we are. You know, this is one of those particular conversations people don't want to talk about. We ran our credit card so badly that we have nothing in it. William Ruto has not brought us here. He might actually have been part and parcel of it because he was the deputy president then. But then should we stop talking about how we got here? Because you cannot ask us about now and not look at context moving forward.
Question. This administration and with William Ruto as deputy president then,
yes,
he definitely was very well appraised about the ongoings in government and how bad the situation may have been. Yet he still made promises and gave timelines to those promises. This is 1 year with him in control.
Yes.
Should he admit that some of the promises he made and that some of the plans he came in with have actually failed?
And I told you that if you are looking for an admission, you should have looked at how the implementation of the plan began. Look at the change in the tax regime. That in and of itself should have told you it wasn't just about raising money. This is government work. This is not a business. GOK is not a business, it's actually a government. So when you see taxes actually coming out by people, and you know the people in Treasury are not new, they've always been there. The only new person could be the PS and probably the CS and a few advisors. The other people, the core engine that actually works the economy is the same. So when you come in and they tell you this is what you want to do, you can only achieve this by doing this. That was the first admission. And I don't know why we are even acting surprised. I am surprised that we are acting surprised that we are where we are today. When we've walked this journey, knowing and singing this song for the last about 7 years. So when he comes on Thursday, I am not in a position to speak for the president. He will be actually speaking about that. But then the truth is that there have been misses, and that happens every time. But then there have also been scores. And like I said, what makes news and what we actually are spinning and running around here, as usual, are the negatives. But there are a lot of positives that we've actually made. And the truth is that without some of these, for example, now, no one talks about flour. Him and I come from places where we consume a lot of ugali. Today, in the village, ugali is about 90 bob, 100 bob. Packet flour is about 153 to 158. We no longer now talk about that. A month ago, 2 months ago, that was the song, right? We've worked around. We've raised so much in harvest. No one is talking about that. So again, we actually now have to push and it is good that the media puts government to task. But as the media does that, sometimes you expect objectivity, not that anyone will ask your hand on how to go about this. But then the truth is that sometimes if we had a balance, it would be much better. Because the problem has been that we sell hopelessness. The only things that are actually selling is bad news, and we expect to have positive people. That's why you look at our social media, it's very toxic. People are very angry.
And is that the issue? Is that what this Kenya Kwanza administration is suffering from? The fact that we're living in the information age, all this information, all the promises they made were well documented and people can go back and refer. All the videos, all their declarations that fuel prices would come down, all that is still accessible to Kenyans. Is that the problem that probably previous administrations didn't face the same problem?
I think he knows very well that Jubilee government has also one of them, a big battery of journalists who are absorbed in government, and many of them understand what's actually happening. I think the problem here we have is that the government did not see this coming. I think Ruto, not talking for Jubilee, is that there are many people in Kenya Kwanza government who are even maybe life members of Jubilee. And so you cannot say that Jubilee cannot hold a candle. I think Ruto, if he felt that Uhuru was not delivering, he had an option to resign. He could step down. He could actually say, I'm not going to be associated. But he hung on until the last minute. And he was having government salary. He was having government. He was
driven by state vehicles to go for swearing in.
Even when he was campaigning, he was protected by the state. So I think he was part and parcel of what happened. For Kenyans to come and delink him with what happened between Jubilee is really not honest. But having said that, I think it's also important for us to note that the cost of living is a critical thing. Unemployment is becoming a nightmare. Corruption, institutionalized corruption. Not any department in government you can actually not find the footprints of corruption. So for us to come here and sit down and think that he's doing better than Uhuru, it's not true. I think corruption is so now rooted, deeply rooted. Everybody is in business, and I think many people in government are doing even private businesses. And these are the things that we are talking about: lifestyle audit, you talk about Article 6 on integrity. So some of things that the government is missing, I think the government needs also to check itself before then, the public, even before the media checks it.
And before I even come to you, Angel, let me go back to Arnold. On this issue of corruption, because you've made a reference to it, that thing of the president, the short anecdote about some items being worth 300, the president calling it's 200, and you call the supplier directly, it's 86. It speaks to the level of corruption in government. Yeah. Yes. If at all the idea of raising revenue was to bridge budget deficit, don't you think that savings through fighting corruption would have actually achieved that result in a much better and much faster way?
Thanks for that. First of all, when I say that Jubilee cannot hold a candle to Kenya Kwanza, even if, let's say, for example, that Kenya Kwanza was failing. When Jubilee came in, how much was our national debt? What was the state of the economy? I'm just saying.
When William Ruto and Uhuru came in.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. This is splitting hairs. That's what I'm actually saying. That for Kenya Kwanza, this is a team that actually is taking in, whoever is taking in as the fifth, who's taking in for the fifth watch. When Kibaki left the economy, what was the state of the economy? It was not the same as the economy William Ruto and Gachagua took over in 2022. It's not the same. It's not like for like. You cannot compare. So if we were to do things the same way they did in 2013, we would be in we would actually get in dire straits. So it's not possible that you can actually liken Jubilee's first term and Kenya Kwanza's first term because the circumstances are not the same. At least one person or two could be the same, yes, and probably some individuals because it's a breakaway, but the circumstances are not the same. Kibaki left us a very healthy economy, doing so well. But what do we do in 10 years? He knows too well. He knows too well our debt situation. That actually in the last 3 months, for every 10 shillings we've been collecting, 8 shillings and 40 cents has been going to pay debt. So how do we remain a going concern?
Even now we are
borrowing. We are borrowing, number one, to remain afloat. Because whatever we are collecting entirely goes to the other. Is that what we were doing in 2013? No. Was that the situation in 2013? It's not the same. So you can't liken. That is not like for like. At least if you are if you consider your comment a fair comment. It's not. So then on corruption, there's been so much, of course, on this. And the president has actually, I don't think you actually remember PS being fired, a board being sent home because of corruption. The president has been tough on this. And these conversations we're having, even the head of public service himself has spoken. And you remember last time we were with you here, we were looking at the statement made by the head of public service, Hope, saying that he has intelligence that there is a lot of stealing. But I needed to ask this before we talk about when there is an admission from the system that there is a problem and we are trying to address that. In the past, we will defend. You remember when Waiguru, there was a problem about NYS? We said they were fighting Waiguru because she was the most performing CS, and therefore, we didn't want that particular government. Is that how we tackled corruption in the last election, in the last cycle? No. We used to defend when there was a case. Today, we are calling out that and asking institutions to stand out, including giving you an example that I've just given you now.
Back to the anecdote you gave, that example, because it goes on. And it says that in that discussion, after the president or his people called the supplier directly and he said that it would actually be the unit cost would actually be 86. Someone followed the president to the office and asked, what shall you do about it? Are you going to fire them? And he said, if I have to fire, then I'll fire everyone.
So and now I was actually going to that. Then you realize that it's actually, the problem of corruption is systemic. It's been here for a while. So once you start dealing with this, like for example, if you want to send away a civil servant, these guys know that the hardest thing to do in this country is not even to win an election, it's to send a civil servant at home. They will be in the office reading newspapers, doing nothing, having been suspended, being paid, but you can't do away with them. So we have got the need to radically reshape the republic if we want to move forward. Because whatever we can do now, with the set of laws we have, the culture that we have, it's going to take a little bit of time. But has the regime done anything about corruption? Yes. We have got a lot of measures in place. We've looked at that. We've seen the president's stance on this. But has that really stopped it? It's not going to stop it immediately.
Angel, between fighting corruption and taxing the Mwananchi more to achieve the same result, this administration opted for taxation.
Well, I admired what Ruto said when he was campaigning, that when he gets into office, he will run Kenya the way Mwai Kibaki was running his government. And when you look at what Mwai Kibaki did 2-3 years after he was elected, he launched the free primary education.
Within 7 days.
Yeah, and I'm a beneficiary of that. But what is this guy doing? 365 days after being elected into office. 1 month after he's elected into office, he first of all employs everybody who has had a history of corruption. So when he says, I'm going to fire everybody, it is not a surprise, because whoever he has also onboarded into his office is as corrupt as any other person, as EACC has even pointed out. People with pending court cases. So it was for you to become minister, and then after you become minister, your charges are dropped by the courts. So what kind of system are we? You know, if there's someone who was saying that Uhuru Kenyatta's government ilikuwa system ya majambazi, I wonder what they call this one, because hii ni system ya majambazi Promax. Because who is leading us? What their history, their track record? Because even you getting employed here, it's based on the things you've done before, and how you stay employed here is based on how you perform. But our government is not based on performance. It is based on who can loot the most. If I put you there, are you able to withdraw 7 billion shillings by a WhatsApp text message? That's what our country has been reduced to.
Evans, if a lot of comparison has been made between this administration and the Kibaki administration, and I'm thinking that Kibaki, if at all he was to make a State of the Nation address within the first year of his administration, he had a lot to talk about, a free primary education within 7 days of assuming office. President Ruto will be struggling to convince Kenyans that he has done something that they can directly feel.
I don't know why people find it difficult to say that after Kibaki, there was Ruto and Uhuru, and they did a lot for 10 years. I think this thing, or trying to make it look like Ruto was not part of the government.
At least the last 5 years.
No, not for the last 10 years. And that's why I want to give Ruto credit of what Uhuru did, including the expressway. Let him take credit. They were in government together. I think when you look at the negatives in Uhuru's regime and only remove Ruto, it's also not fair to him. I think Ruto needs to take credit for whatever happened successfully in Uhuru's government. And these people in Kenya Kwanza who keep on saying, for the last 5 years, he was not with Uhuru. For the last 5 years, he was with Uhuru. They did well. And that's a fact. So to start saying that he was not part of that. And that's what we expected, that once he becomes president, the continuation of what they did, good, would continue. But he's sinking down deeply. And I think it's so important to note that people in government who are corrupt, and they're part of the corrupt network, will not allow and accept. I feel very bad to see EACC chasing police officers, arresting police officers, and embarrassing them on national television. We want to see that happening to CSS, to big people in government. I'm not casting aspersion to anybody. He just mentioned that removing a civil servant is not easy. What happened to Chiloba? And you see the report that was produced mentioned a very senior person in cabinet with Chiloba having misappropriated and questions of integrity. Chiloba is bundled out, he's out. The other person is still sitting in the cabinet. So how do you, that double standard when you're talking about corruption? And I think the president should have been informed. These people you are having in your office have been mentioned adversely in a corrupt investigation. Please take action.
Yes.
Because there are many Kenyans out here who are able to do, to serve even better in cabinet.
When it comes to corruption, this administration appears a bit reluctant. So far, nothing much has happened. We saw President Uhuru Kenyatta even fire CSs within the first 2-3 years of his administration. We're not seeing that kind of push, especially in the fight against graft.
First of all, I do not think the devil calls sinners sinners. He might actually be calling them my friends, my children, or something like that. I do not know how the devil refers to sinners, but I doubt the devil looks at sinners as sinners. So when Jubilee, for example, actually talks about corruption in Kenya Kwanza, then you really want, because if you're going to count sinners, you don't count the devil, right? So Jubilee should not. And the angel knows that as in coming from Jubilee and speaking for Jubilee, she should not. This is an administration that cannot, as in account for a whole Eurobond. that
Jubilee
money.
is Ruto included.
That's what I'm saying. No, she was speaking for. At that particular point, she's spread that.
Representing Kenyans.
So it's true. It's true. Fine.
Jubilee.
It's okay. So she's speaking for Jubilee at least, but at least she wears that hat. So I do not think that Jubilee, like the devil, should call sinners, because their place is special when it comes to corruption. So I, again, don't want to go back to that and say like anyone in Jubilee should not be talking about corruption. They shouldn't. But be that as it is, on the issue of corruption, I think the president has actually been much firm on issues that have actually been pointed out during his watch. Mention to me anywhere there has been a case that has been cited where he's not acted or there is no active investigation that is ongoing without the government's, like last time we weaponized the fight against corruption. Today, that happens. Do you hear anyone summoning Oginde to actually do his work? No. We actually have allowed institutions, like for example, as a people, we agreed that EACC will be fighting corruption. You don't have to come up with a new mechanism, to ensure that then corruption is fought according to how you want. So, show me any case that exists where there is no active investigation and action has not been taken, at least appropriate. There is none. So, we are going to talk about, and you talk about wastages and of course austerity. Do you know?
Recent trip to Saudi Arabia.
You've not, for example, followed up what has been happening elsewhere. But when the president said that people reduce their numbers, I know people have been deboarded from planes. Civil servants, as usual, will always have that mischief. It's as old as we've always been here. People have been deboarded at JKIA. Somehow you've used your own ujanja and gotten into the plane. You are going for a trip elsewhere. People who fall within what that circular actually said, a number of them have actually been, you actually are deboarded on the tarmac and taken back to the office. That is actually working out. But no one follows through that. So on austerity, the measures are working out. We've done away with consuming art, or rather bringing in debt to actually then fund consumption. We are doing production. There are numbers to support that. We don't want to look at that because it's not sexy at the moment. Numbers are only good if they bring out sob stories, and sob stories sell. So, on corruption, the president has done well. There are misses, yes, but then I would really ask this particular panel. Apart from the old cliches about fire people, send people at home and everything else, all of us know that there is Article 24, for example. Everybody has got a right.
There needs to be consequences in the fight.
Honestly,
there are consequences. Who has stolen and has not been acted upon?
Honestly, if you see it, on admission, the chief whip of Kenya Kwanza, standing somewhere and saying that parliamentarians pay him before they travel.
Mm-hmm. You need to differentiate banter.
No, it's not banter. That's not
banter. That's political banter.
We cannot say
for
that
a person of that stature.
That is an office.
It's the same story we were talking about the CS saying something.
Really, we get such statements elsewhere.
We don't get
then I'm going to talk about Babu Owino.
No.
I will be talking about...
let's allow everyone.
Home of Untold MP.
This is somebody who is a chief whip of the ruling party. And I think he speaks out of authority. Nah. And he's very clear. He says, he even tells Kenyans, line up, I pay you to listen to me. He goes ahead and says that these guys come to my office to pay me before they travel. That's corruption. That's outright.
He has been summoned by the
KCC, misuse of power. And I think, and you
it is an ongoing case.
Interestingly, he will get away with it.
But you see,
he will get away with it. That is the shame.
In the bully, let's just
That's
get
the
real.
Shame. He will get away with it.
This is what I call splitting hairs. Every time politicians are on the podium, and Angie is actually a very good politician. She knows what politicians do. When, for example, we have got Homa Bay Town MP saying that we will go to the streets so that you give us nusu mkate. Is he speaking for Azimio? Definitely no. All of us, at least anybody with an understanding, knows that he was actually in Nandi, and for him to actually make sense. You remember what he was saying? He was saying it's the same space. When he says, mpaka mutupatie nusu mkate ndio, mukikataa kutupatia tutaenda maandamano. Why is that not a serious issue? That's political banter.
It's not banter.
That's political banter.
Speaking of politics, because at the point has been made, speaking of politics, Angel, the president can take pride that his management of politics, even if he was to draw parallels with the Kibaki administration, that he has managed to contain political upheaval in the first 1 year. He has a very impressive control of the Houses of Parliament, and that would be a positive for him. But is he converting that to something tangible for Kenyans?
Fred, what the head of state is doing is, with the support of his cabinet secretaries, is to gazette national holidays on days we don't expect to plant trees, on a day that Kenyans will fuliza to drink what they do not have, like El Nino is now on our doorstep. I don't see how that is a solution to the issues that we are facing as a country. On what you say that political houses have been balanced is something...
I didn't say balance. I say he has
managed.
He has control, a very impressive control over the Houses of Parliament.
That's interesting, because now what him and even Speaker Wetangula are doing is like is turning off the lights in Parliament and doing what they think they need to do as a political party. Because when you even have a finance bill voted in by people when they have not even been communicated to, what does that mean? That is not transparency. When we have the leader of majority in Parliament being the one who has the minority in Parliament, that is not justice. I mean, when you have a political party writing countless letters to the Speaker, asking the Speaker to act according to the court's orders, that is not managing political spaces. That's just a time bomb that is going to, once it ticks, it's going to blow off, because it's 1 year into office, and we are seeing the political space. I mean, when you look at those who ran and did not win, and now they feel like cuts that have been rained on. But soon as things keep going on, as people keep realizing that this government is a scam, the Kenya Kwanza promises are a scam and they are not coming into fruition, then you're going to see more political heads coming out. There's a lot of gagging, especially when I look at Mount Kenya. Mount Kenya leaders are not able to even express themselves properly. They are fighting amongst themselves. We saw the case in Kiambu, where county assemblies have clearly seen that this government is not going anywhere. The Kenya Kwanza government is not fulfilling the promises of their people, and they are the ones who are going to suffer, the cost, the first ones. So what do? They want to kick out the governor, Wamatangi. But now what happens? Now, instead of taking morning walks or running the economy, the deputy president comes down to talk about kingpins and putting together the house of the leadership of Kiambu. I mean, that is not the way to run the country at this moment.
Evans, the president can definitely not blame politics for some of the failures of this administration. He managed to handle, and he did it himself, he managed to handle that bit, the political upheaval that was there present immediately after the election. He has managed to quiet it down. He can no longer blame that.
I've always said, and I'm a serious proponent of the fact that the executive must allow parliamentarians to protect the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty from the excesses of the disposition over the executive. And the absolute, there's a total absolute political money that plays in parliament. And I think the moment the president realizes that parliament is sovereign, this thing of interfering in parliament and coming up with all those things saying majority is total undermining the sovereignty of parliament. And that does not mean that he's in control. And one of the things I've always believed is that whatever the president did was serious nusumukati. Forming coalition after election and co-opting people from the opposition into your government, and some of them, what Kalonzo, people used to make a fun about Kalonzo, the kupitia katikati, and coming into government, is not going to help him. What he's just trying to do is trying to demean parliament. And even some parliamentarians from Kenya Kwanza actually even don't think, because it's what the president thinks. And that's what, and I think once we really delink executive from parliament, that's protection of democracy. Mm-hmm. And I think the president should just allow parliamentarians to do their work, protect democracy, and he sits in the executive. Okay. And I think it's important. Another thing I saw the other day, he was talking about the independence of the judiciary. You saw how they went to Dubai for a conference. I think we need to be very sincere. This country is on its knees in terms of our spending as a government, as a country. And I think we need to cut, when you talk about costs, cutting costs, and an independent executive or an independent judiciary that then decides that we can only be comfortable in Dubai, but not in government building, where, and you see, somebody will start arguing that they don't have to go anywhere within.
As we wrap up this discussion on this, because I also want us to make a mention of what's going to happen at the Senate with the Kawira Mwangaza impeachment trial. The issue of austerity, now that you've mentioned, that kind of leadership needs to come from the highest office in this land. That if at all we all agree that the situation is bad, it was caused by whatever forces or influence in our history, but now we are here. How come we're not getting that feeling from the executive or the presidency that we need to tighten our budgets or tighten our belts?
The president, from the arm he controls, has given directions. The head of public service has actually done a circular, even limiting the number of people that can actually go out. But the president cannot do that. You remember when parliamentarians threw out that particular circular, and there was a very hot debate. Actually, the people who were leading that particular bit of it was Mio, Upio and I, for example, saying that the head of public service cannot tell them how to travel and what. They are all over, by the way. And if you want to see how parliamentarians actually utilize their money, you just need to follow Peter Salasia. You see him in South Africa. He's now in Nigeria. You see, the others at least go quietly. For him, he splashes it out there. So he speaks about parliamentary capture.
Independence, yeah.
And you see, for me, I look at it very differently. He's addressing the fruits, not the root. Parliament is as independent as possible when they choose to, and on the things that do not help us. Like, for example, how they spend their money, where they want to go, no one should direct them. But then somehow they will tell you that they're being captured on the legislative agenda. I know exactly what, and I've spoken about that repeatedly, that there is one thing if we did away with in parliament, we will have a free parliament. I actually support parliamentary independence because of one reason. When we came up with the new constitution, we were trying to do away with the excesses of the executive. So we brought in checks and balances and thought that when we took a lot of power and put it in parliament, so many people could not conspire against the nation. We were doing away with imperial presidency. What we didn't know is that somehow this simple thing we call CDF is the single most threat to parliamentary independence. And I'll tell you why. Under Jubilee, for example, you are a member of parliament. You mess up with your CDF, no one asks you. But then immediately you try to become quote-unquote independent. That file will be brought. The one thing I'm actually opposed to what the president has been trying to do is to mainstream CDF, to make it constitutional. That one I am opposed to it because we need a parliament. In the words of Martin Shikuku, parliament should be the people's watchman. A watchman who's also eating with the thieves cannot oversight. That is why if you really want parliamentarians to be completely, for us, the biggest problem we have here, whatever we're talking about here, just one thing. The function of oversight is not effective. And parliament, if we were to be honest, is the weak link in our governance structure. Would have
parliament, if at all it was independent, would we be in this the kind of situation? This same parliament rubber stamped the Finance Act that imposed all this heavy taxation. Do you think that if at all parliamentarians were independent in their own thinking, we would not be in the same situation we are in now?
Well, that's hard to say, Fred, because even as Arnold is talking about the CDF, we are now even seeing, I'd like also to hear what he has to say about the ward development funds that even now the county assemblies also want, so that they're able to fulfill their promises that they make to the people. I think the problem with our legislative arms in Kenya is that is the voter. That is the person who pushes our members of parliament, our county assemblies, to want to go to dig deeper into their pockets. Because when you meet a member of parliament and you listen to how much comes into their pockets, to their accounts, and how much goes out to support their constituency, is something that is quite significant. You would not admire, even you would not want to become a member of parliament. I don't see yes and no, because I think parliament has also made very great strides in the history of our nation. It is a bedrock to the legislative issues that we've made so much of the issues from things to do with youth leadership, like the National Youth Council that we get to enjoy, people like me and Maliba. There's so much there. There's sex abuse bills that have been passed in parliament that benefit women. Maybe something that they're lagging on is even the 2/3 gender rule, which is something that they really need to up their game on. But largely, I would think if they were to be independent, I think they still have the luxury to become independent. They don't have anything stopping them from being independent.
And I'm asking this because the State of the Nation address will be directed at them. The President will be addressing Houses of Parliament. In as much as it will be a public address to the whole country, it is for parliamentarians to scrutinize whatever the President says. Do you think that they will do more than just stand up and applaud the President for whatever he says come Thursday?
I think most of them will just applaud him because they are there to do that. But I think Kenya, as she has mentioned it, I think it's also an opportunity for voters to audit their parliamentarians after every 5 years. And I think it's also important that you just put a scorecard and see what... I saw the report the other day ranking who is the most active or most performing...
Best performing MP.
Less performing and most performing MPs. I think... I don't know why we are carrying such a poll, because at the end of the day, every constituency or every voter elected his own leader on their own merit. So I don't think, and then you cannot measure performance when other areas have no even money to develop. Mm-hmm. So it's not about coming and logging in Parliament and logging out, but it's about what you can do on the ground. And some areas in this country, you'll realize that nothing can happen without the support of the national government. Whether you give an MP CDF, that will not even help without the national government putting an input. So there are areas that are lucky that a CDF can be enough. So I think we need to really sit down and have a serious conversation on how to hold our MPs accountable. Because most of them, of course, we know parliamentary political money plays in Parliament. And many people, we have read those cases of money exchanging hands in toilets, in the corridors. And this is how Parliament is demeaned. I think voters need to reclaim their Parliament and ensure that the people you sent there are people who are actually able to deliver for you, okay, and not people who just are swayed with political emotions.
Okay.
Actually,
something briefly to add to this issue.
I just needed to say this, that no one has captured Parliament. Parliament offers itself for capture. We already systemically set up Parliament for failure because immediately we gave them CDF. And I'll tell you that there is a direct correlation between parliaments being blunt, our Parliament today being blunt, and the function of oversight dying, and CDF. On the day we do away with CDF, and members of Parliament have to shine in Parliament. You know, today a member of Parliament will tell you that hiyo kizungu mingi ya Parliament siwezi kufanya so long as I actually am dealing with CDF. CDF for us was a pilot project on devolution. It worked well. We now have got devolution. MPs, in the spirit of separation of powers, should not, of course, they will tell you that in law, a member of Parliament has nothing to do with CDF. Yet, even if a member of Parliament dies today, a new CDF is actually put in place. So, de jure is what it is. De facto, it's a different thing. So, I just needed to finalize this. That you cannot even be a member of the CDF committee if you did not campaign for a member of Parliament. But the CDF Act says that the MP is only a patron. And if you ask them, they will argue legally. So I'm telling you that when MPs have nothing to give people sweets to, they will go back to their core function, which is, for me, 4 things. Number 1, representing the people. Number 2, doing legislation. Number 3, which is most important, oversight. These people have not even empowered the Office of the Auditor General, which you cannot do oversight without the Office of the Auditor General. Over the years, Parliament has ensured that the Auditor General is always behind. They even want to query the Auditor General's report. Have you ever seen anybody jailed for actually misusing CDF? Like all other things, people have actually been sent to jail or even arrested. Have you ever seen any person arrested and jailed for CDF? None. Okay. Number 5 is budgeting.
To take you back. Sorry to take you back. I think it is Parliament has been captured.
No.
By the executive.
Parliament has been captured by greed.
No. It's
and
been
CDF.
Captured by the, in this way. You see, there was a debate in Parliament of which side is the majority, for example, and the fact that Azimio was at the majority by then, and a lot of people had been coerced.
Azimio had majority by deceit.
No.
People signed on what they didn't see.
Gentlemen.
Okay.
People have been arguing.
I know the debate you want us to, and it will be of interest for Angel, but I don't want us to go there. For the few remaining minutes, I want us to focus on what's going to happen at the Senate. It's also a big discussion point about matters devolution and the threat of impeachment that is now rampant across our counties. Kawera Mwangaza will be appearing for the first of a 2-day impeachment trial before the plenary. Meanwhile, in Kiambu, I think we're now on day 4 or 5 of that 21-day ultimatum by the MCAs to the governor for him to comply with their demands, or he faces impeachment as well. So this threat of impeachment, are we seeing a situation where it is being now constantly misused by county assemblies to hold governors or county executives at ransom?
Yeah, Fred, yes and no, because when you see to it the impeachment of a governor based on what 30 people decide in their county assembly, I think it's something that we need to review as a country. And that's the beauty of the Constitution of 2010, because now 10 years later, we can still review what we passed about over 10 years ago. I think Senate needs to also be independent. So cliche, just from talking about the independence of a legislative arm of government. And they need to review the cases. It doesn't have to be a case of just questioning public funds and how they're spent. I mean, let's look beyond the politics of the counties and look at a broader lens of exactly what has this governor done. What are they supposed to do? What is the issue around the governance system? Mm-hmm. Because even I want to see exactly what's wrong with Kawira Mwangaza being elected as an independent governor, as a woman, a first time one at that case. I'd want to see exactly what is the relationship between, especially women governance and impeachment. Just 1 year after
she's
office.
Just 1 out of 7. The rest are not facing impeachment. but impeachment is a political process, and
I think. In mature democracies, you either resign. You don't even have to wait for impeachment. And I think the fact that we are maturing democratically, I think whatever has happened even before and what we are about to witness is that I think the governor should have just resigned, because what she's being accused for, this is not the first time she's being brought to the Senate. The misdemeanors, the things she has been able to do that she feels with her own conscience. That's why I say this is the only country where we had that saying of I would rather die than resign. So I think we need to see a culture where leaders take responsibility and just own up to whatever they think they've done. Apologizing is also another option.
I have a question, because it is a political process. Yes. And the kind of allegations we are seeing, there's 7 allegations against the governor. Yeah. We are aware that the genesis of the bad blood between the governor and the county assembly had a lot to do with that conversation about the ward allocations. Before even the first impeachment attempt, that one did not sail through. That bad blood persisted, and now she's facing an...
But look here, there was also some sort of citizen participation. So when you talk about the county assembly, remember, this thing also went to the public. And I think for the last 1 week or so, a couple of days, I've not actually been seeing MCAs. I've seen members of the public even pleading with the Senate, please don't return her back.
But we've seen also other members of the public saying, please defend our governor.
You know, on Kawira Mwangaza, it's just the sad tale of how we continue to treat our women in leadership. You know, every time, and it's easy for men to actually, men in this country can do very terrible things. Somehow they explain their way around, and that is how a man should be, even in leadership. But we have got a very high threshold for women, that men can actually go to political platforms, including what you say Osoro did. Mm-hmm. If it was a woman, the lynching that will actually accompany her would be high decibels up there. Mm-hmm. So look at all the issues that are actually being leveled against Mwangaza. And Mwangaza is a human being. You know, this is politics. It's not a love affair. I don't have to love you to work with you. We cannot make the threshold of impeaching a governor, bring it so low, and somehow these MCAs themselves, if you're talking about one of the grounds upon which somebody should actually be impeached or removed is if they are of sound mind. A lot of times you see MCAs and the things they do, and you really want to question if they are of sound mind. So let's start from that particular point. As in, I'm talking about the truth. So let me get to this issue. Let me get to this issue. Number one.
Even what the governor is doing, like appointing the husband.
So this is the issue here. And with due respect, a lot of them are my friends. For most of my adult life, I have worked with the youth. That is what I've spent doing in my most of my adult life.
Okay.
And now I'm doing the same even for other countries now. But I'll tell you this. Of course, most of them are actually youthful. But in Kawira Mwangaza's woes are threefold. Number one, let us go back to how she came to power. She defeated what we would call two elephants. In fact, one of them is called Kingangi, the crocodile of Meru. That is Kiraitu. And people did not expect what a number of them would actually call some regular random woman from somewhere to actually come and beat them. She beat them square. She beat Linturi, she beat Kiraitu. A lot of those people, by the way, have not really recovered from that defeat. And it's still, and that is a fact. You find it on the ground. Those are the people who are raising money. Those are the people who are organizing to actually bring her down. She has got her weaknesses. But is the threshold really at a place where the people of Meru have to wait until the MCAs find somebody they really want to work with? That development in Meru has to wait until MCAs solve that particular problem. The second thing is that she doesn't control parliament, or rather the assembly. That also has been a challenge. She refused to give them the World Development Fund. And that's why I'm saying so long as CDF exists, governors are going to have problems because MCAs are wondering, what's the difference between us and MPs? By the way, they no longer pass bylaws, they pass laws, so long as they do not violate Schedule 4 of the Constitution. So we need to do away with the CDF so that legislatures can actually be, or rather the legislatures can actually do their work. And our legislators can actually now properly be the people's watchdogs. Okay. They be the people's watchmen. So for Kawira Mwangaza, I'd really love the Senate to do one of its functions, to defend devolution. If we make it so easy for Mwangaza to go down, I can tell you the next person going will be Johnson Sakaja. Okay. And then somebody else. So we brought the threshold solo. We do not need to have parliament. And one law that has actually been pending for a very long time, and I need this administration to actually expedite it.
As you make your final comment.
Is the impeachment procedure bill that went to parliament in 2018. We needed to standardize and actually ensure that we have got a proper framework on how we impeach people. That impeachment procedure bill has not really gone beyond. When Cherargei was the chairperson, I think, for the committee, the Legal Affairs Committee, we need to work around that. So that then one day you are not being lynched by a small committee, and then tomorrow we are sending you to the committee of the whole house, okay. And then there is no standard around that. We need to actually make it so easy. So, or rather to make it straight, standard and just. Okay. I do not see any sin that is worth sending Kawira home. The people of Meru, or at least the few leaders in Meru, must accept that Kawira Mwangaza is the choice of the people of Meru. And we should not destroy her career just because she beat some people. They have to accept that.
Angel, final comment.
No, on this one, I want to agree with Maliba. Sorry, man. Yes, but because I think we really need to do a review on the impeachment procedure bill. I think it's too neither here nor there in terms of impeaching governors. I mean, a decision that has been made by over 100,000 people cannot just be overturned by 20 county assemblies. And I'm looking forward to the State of the Nation speech by the President, and I hope to hear more on what he has in store for the youth, to see more on how we can ensure that we have a better economy. I mean, we are all in this bus, and to see less of him in the political space, especially the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, is an office that we need to have a conversation about the next time we sit here, Fred.
Okay. Finally, Evans.
I think, in short, is that leaders need to start taking responsibility and being held accountable. I think impeachment is one way of enhancing and strengthening democracy. And I think we don't need to, we need to see many governors being impeached or even resigning for us to be able to ensure that our democracy is really working.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Evans Wafula, human rights consultant and political analyst. Angel Mbudia, chairperson, Jubilee Youth League, and Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst. Thank you for a very robust discussion this morning. And this is something we'll continue to discuss even as we anticipate that State of the Nation address by the President come Thursday to the Houses of Parliament. Allow me to go through this editorial comment on disaster response by the government. Now, the government's response to the ongoing high rainfall and flooding in Kenya, as highlighted in the Kenya Red Cross report, is seriously wanting. The loss of lives, livestock, and displacement of thousands of households in just 2 weeks is a tragic situation that calls for immediate and effective action. One of the most troubling aspects of this crisis is the delayed response and the apparent lack of proactive measures taken by the government. The fact that the warning about these floods was issued as early as August and that there were discussions about setting aside funds at different government levels is quite disheartening. It raises questions about the effectiveness of the disaster preparedness and management strategies in place. The criticism aimed at leaders from Mandera County for holding a press conference in Nairobi yesterday, rather than being on the ground addressing the crisis, is valid. Elected officials should prioritize their constituents during times of crisis, and their actions should reflect a strong commitment to serving the people who elected them. It is essential that both the national and county governments work together to create comprehensive and proactive approaches to deal with this ongoing crisis. Given the weatherman's prediction that the rains will continue for the next 3 months, there is a pressing need for effective disaster preparedness and management. This should include timely allocation of resources and coordination among relevant authorities, and transparent communication with the public about the measures being taken to mitigate the crisis. It is imperative that government officials fulfill their responsibilities to protect and support their citizens during such trying times. And that is a TV47 editorial comment this morning.